You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 25. Today I'll be talking to Jane Kim. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. If this is your first time listening, Art Affairs is meant to give you a look at and into the new contemporary art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, shining a spotlight on the human side of the wonderful work they do. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, and you can check out new episodes on all your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, if you like what I'm doing here, be sure to subscribe. And you can always connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist and founder of Inkwell, Jane Kim. Jane and her studio are most well known for their large-scale mural pieces, featuring all sorts of creatures from the natural world. Everything from an epic wall of birds at Cornell's Lab of Ornithology to 11-story monarch butterflies. We talk about some of these notable projects in her portfolio on the show, as well as the founding of Inkwell, her upcoming gallery show, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Jane Kim. Jane, welcome to the show. You were actually suggested by two previous guests, so Zoe and Alex Warnings both suggested you, so it's finally good to have you on.
Wow, thank you so much. Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Zoe. That's amazing. I really appreciate it, and I am so happy to be on. Thank you, Michael.
All right, awesome. So let's dive into your background for a little bit. From what I understand, you grew up in Mount Prospect, Illinois, which I'm not terribly familiar with the Illinois geography. So what was that area like? Was it urban, rural?
Yeah, so I don't expect anyone to be too familiar with Illinois geography. Mount Prospect is a northwest suburb of Chicago. It's about, 30 minutes northwest. It's near O'Hare Airport, which is probably more familiar to people. It is very suburban, track homes like Leave It to Beaver, Wonder Years sort of neighborhood. I feel like I had a very lovely childhood upbringing as a result, got to walk to school, especially in my elementary days. And it was white picket fence, suburban life.
Being that close to Chicago, did you spend much time in the city growing up?
Yeah, I did. So when I was 3, my mom and dad enrolled me in Suzuki violin school. And I remember on the weekends taking the train with my mom to do various rehearsals in the city, and went to the museums and went to the city for recreational purposes. And then in high school, when I had my own car and felt autonomous enough to take the train myself, my friends and I would, of course, spend a lot of time in the city at that point. So, but I have to say, having grown up outside of Chicago, I don't feel that connected to the city now as an adult. I feel like whenever I have an opportunity to actually go back to Chicago, it feels like a whole new place of exploration with some distant memories of, my childhood connection there. I did take a history of Chicago summer school course. How old was I? I was maybe in either the 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. I honestly can't remember, but we did a number of field trips at that point. So yeah.
So violin at 3, I read about that. So, effectively you're like a prodigy is what you're saying.
No, I feel like everyone around me was that age. It was just like, that seemed like an appropriate time for whatever reason for all of those parents to start their kids in this, real boot camp training program. And then it was like the part of my childhood that I think stands out the most was my connection to violin. And art was more just sort of this thing that I did for like my own sanity or something. You know, I was a real loner as a kid, and I would spend a lot of time indoors and outdoors, but indoors just doing like in my head, just buried in like an art project over the summer. But I never really remembered it as being a major part of my upbringing like the violin was.
How long did the violin last?
All the way until college, and even my first year of art school at RISD, I tried to maintain it, and I joined a quartet at Brown University, and that only lasted like, I don't know, half the year. It just became really hard to put myself into both of these practices, which require each a lot of time. And there was only so much time to go around. So then, violin kind of just fell off, and now I just pick it up when I can and practice when I can. But
so you're still able to play?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the muscle memory from whatever I retained at that point is still there, but I'm not good anymore. I would never consider myself good.
So with these sort of competing interests, so to speak, when did you recognize that you ultimately wanted to go into art professionally rather than music?
It was in high school when I was thinking about, schools to apply to. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I don't really want to pursue music in college. It didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I was even going to be able to make it. I was okay. And, at best, maybe I would be in like a local orchestra and taught lessons, but it just didn't seem like I could really thrive as a musician. But then, when I really started thinking about, well, what do I really want to pursue? I don't know, art just kind of, it sort of dawned on me like, well, you really love doing this. I didn't actually know if I was any good at it. I felt like my teachers or peers would tell me I was good at it, but it was just something that I loved doing. So I thought, well, I'm going to pursue what I love because that's what life is hopefully supposed to be about. And when I told my parents, I want to go to art school, my dad sat me down and was like, well, do you think you can make it as an artist? And I looked back at him. I was like, yeah, I think I can do that. And he was like, all right, well then go to art school. And I said, okay. So I applied, to maybe only like 5 or 6 schools, and 5 of the 6 were, art schools.
And so it sounds like your parents were pretty supportive of your desire to be an artist.
So supportive. I was surprised by that. I honestly didn't know. I have an older sister, and I think us being first generation, there was a lot of cultural sort of melding, right? When I came along, she was born in Korea, I was born here. I think they placed a lot more expectation on her in terms of what was right and what they thought was right. And, now she's an anesthesiologist and a critical care doctor of her choice, of course. She wasn't forced into it, but I think that she definitely felt more pressured. And I sort of had a lot more freedom to explore and make my own choices. And I was definitely, a focused kid in my creative aspirations, and went from sort of one obsession to the next obsession, but all in creative ways. So, I think because of that, my parents didn't see that as a surprise and were supportive of it as a result.
That's very cool. Living in the suburbs, did you have much exposure to nature at all? Because obviously that's a big part of your life now, but was that something that you had around you growing up?
I think when I think about it now, I had it more than I thought I did. I spent a lot of time outside. I love playing outside, climbing trees, being in the mud, going, swimming. We lived by a creek, and, I just remember picking berries there. And, but more than that, it was more that I was always really interested in animals and plants. Like, the subject matter and all the art that I chose to do was always tied to that. So it wasn't that I necessarily had immediate exposure to it, but even now, the things that got me excited was learning about animals and plants and seeing them. And I remember like one day there was a ring on the doorbell, and it was a door-to-door salesman selling encyclopedias, and my dad bought a set, and just like really immersing myself in these volumes and learning, I think. So that element was a big part of my childhood. He also came home one day with this huge, dining room table poster of the solar system. And it was this black, gorgeous map. And, felt like it was just part of our childhood. Like we left it there forever. And my sister and I would just, be enamored, with all the information that was on these posters. So yeah, I think maybe that was like my connection to the outside world was through Encyclopedia Britannica and maps and posters and other scientific illustration oriented things. Like he brought this other poster home of like fish of Lake Michigan, and I remember loving that poster. I think we actually still have it to this day. So that was I think I really loved learning in that capacity through scientific illustration.
So you mentioned applying to several art schools. You ended up deciding on RISD in Rhode Island. Why did you end up going there?
It's not a very romantic or glamorous answer. Frankly, they ended up giving me the biggest scholarship. So that was important to obviously my family and I. We weren't going to be able to afford private school outright. So that was kind of the biggest reason. Obviously it had a stellar reputation, and I was definitely interested in, leaving the Chicagoland area for college. I wanted to try, other cities out and be away. So it felt like the right choice. And, Brown University was attached. And when I found out that if you were enrolled at RISD, you could still take classes at Brown, it made me feel like, oh, okay, I can still maybe have a liberal arts education that I'm going to be missing going simply to art school. And I did utilize that. So that was cool.
Very cool. And your focus was printmaking.
Yes.
What attracted you to printmaking? Did you have experience with that prior?
Well, no, that's not true. Actually, my high school was kind of the coolest high school ever. Not only did it have a strong, arts or music aspect to it, it also actually had an amazing art program. And we had, access to ceramics and to, welding, to photography, and to printmaking. And this was a public high school. So to have all of that available to us was pretty remarkable. So in my portfolio, I actually did include a lithograph and a copper etching. So I did have experience with it. I did love it when I tried it out. And I think because I do like process oriented mediums, and I don't know, printmaking. I initially thought I was going to do illustration when I had to choose my major for my sophomore year, but I switched at the last minute to printmaking because I think I felt like it was the curriculum had more fine art focus than the illustration program did at RISD. And I was interested in immersing myself a little bit more into that. But at the same time, I really felt like I was learning, techniques, so I was learning linocut. I was learning silkscreen. I was learning, lithograph. I was learning, etching, and it felt somehow more, exciting to be able to learn all these different techniques. So that was the reason why I ended up with printmaking.
What type of printmaking was like the majority of your work in? What did you like the most?
At the time, I think I focused mostly on etching. I really liked copper engraving and etching, and the experimental sort of lithograph was so technical. The process of prepping the stone and all the chemical reactions with the gum arabic. And maybe it was a bit too chemistry like for me. And there wasn't an ability to organically explore the medium. I really liked relief printing, but again, I don't know, just cutting linocut or a wood block also felt a bit limiting, and somehow etching felt the most experimental. And I could, there were so many different techniques within etching, from the acid baths that you could do versus just a straight engraving versus, just a mixture of the techniques. It felt free and organic, and I don't know, just that there was a lot of options in mark making. And I think to this day, copper is still, one of my favorite metals. I love it.
Very cool. So you ended up graduating in 2003. Do you think that your time there was worthwhile, even though you're not really printmaking today? I mean, you're doing very different things today. Do you still feel like that was a valuable experience just from what you learned?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because when I was at school, the things that I was most interested in were actually kind of discouraged. Now RISD has an amazing, I feel, nature focused curriculum. They even offer scientific illustration, which they didn't at the time that I was there. The Nature Center was really a place that very few of my, colleagues and fellow students, frequented, but now it's a real big part of RISD and what they're known for. But when I was there, I think I got a lot of pushback from fellow classmates and from faculty saying that nature wasn't actually an interesting topic. And neither was technical drawing or technical art making. But at the same time, I wouldn't take back the challenge that I had from that experience today. I think that it's actually only made me a stronger artist, even though ultimately I went back to a more technical style. I think that the way that I think about it now was very much shaped by my education at RISD. And, I think everything always adds to who you are today. So that experience too, I'm very grateful for that time.
Awesome. So after graduating, pretty much right away, you moved to the other side of the country.
I did.
to California, in San Francisco specifically. What brought you to California?
Everyone was moving to New York City, and no offense, New York City and everyone who moved there, but I just knew it wasn't the city for me, and I didn't want to move back home. And so I thought, well, where should I go? And I settled on the West Coast and San Francisco specifically. I also didn't feel super connected to Los Angeles, and it just felt like a place that made sense. So I just decided to move. I didn't even have a job. I thought, well, San Francisco has some great printmaking facilities, Crown Point Press and SF, and then of course Paulson Press in Berkeley were two reasons that also brought me to the Bay Area. And I was very fortunate to have been an intern at Paulson Press for a year, and then actually worked there as a printmaker for like a year and a half after.
Okay, nice. So at what point did you realize that you wanted to start moving into scientific illustration now that those kind of reins were removed from RISD?
It took a while. It really, really did. I learned about a science illustration program in 2004, the one that I ended up applying for. So that was only a year after I graduated, but I didn't actually apply until 2008 or 2009, I guess. And I think I just needed that time to really figure myself out and figure my art out. And I think over time, I just started to find myself becoming more and more interested in, going to natural history museums, and excited when I saw interesting interpretive signage on hikes, or, National Geographic magazines. And, there was always this little voice that said, I want to do that. And I think the thing that really, brought it home for me was actually meeting my husband, who is now the co-founder of Inkwell. And at the time when I met him, he still is today, but was a correspondent for Outside Magazine. And so he was an independent journalist and doing these incredible stories about adventure and nature and exploration. And, I thought to myself, man, that is the coolest job ever. How can I do that? After seeing an example of, somebody really making an interesting career out of, exploring the natural world, it really pushed me to want to, do that too. And, that's when I actually applied for the Science Illustration program and, got in. And from there, it made how I wanted to move forward with art crystal clear, which was a really good feeling because I do feel that from 2003 until 2009, so that 6-year window, I did feel quite lost at times.
And so that science program, that was at Cal State Monterey Bay, right?
Yes.
I guess in what ways did that program differ from what you experienced in the more traditional art school program at RISD? I'm assuming there was more emphasis on observation and precision and stuff like that, but I guess what were the differences?
Well, the biggest, first and foremost difference was how enthralled and excited everybody was to be inspired by this subject matter. That was probably the best part about it, was that it was focused exactly on the subject matter that I was interested in. Beyond that, it's a pretty technical program. So there was a lot of emphasis on traditional techniques of scientific illustration and learning, stipple and coquille paper and, how to use a grid properly and, reducing lens, which if you aren't familiar with that is actually it looks like a magnifying glass, but you hold over your drawing and it reduces it because traditionally in science illustration, you're making a bigger illustration that's reduced for print purposes. And so to see how your, illustration is holding up when it's, at a smaller scale. I learned computer, skills, Adobe Creative Suite. And, it felt very much like a program that was meant to train you to be a freelance illustrator, right? And RISD, on the other hand, did not have a big focus on the business side of being an artist, which is real. So, I think that I felt a little bit more prepared to be freelance afterwards. And again, I just think that I came away with very different things. And, during that program, I also learned that, I don't know if I want to be a straightforward, technical scientific illustrator. I think that, in learning what goes into, formal scientific illustration, that wasn't for me either. I was missing that, creative expression or, interpretive aspect of art. And so, I think that was the time, that year that I was in that program, I started to really think about how I could bring the two disciplines together and what might be a really interesting and impactful way to take the things that I love about scientific illustration, but bring them, or share them maybe in a slightly different way than, was traditional.
Nice. And that's interesting. And I know you sort of self-identify as, equal parts scientific illustrator and fine artist, which is sort of interesting because those are, separately considered to be right brain activities, left brain activities, science and art. So I guess why do you feel that it's important for you to have both? Like what were you missing in fine art that scientific illustration fulfilled and vice versa?
That's a really, really good question. And I don't actually know if I know how to answer that succinctly still. It's a question that I ask myself all the time. I mean, literally all the time. And I think that I come away with maybe bits and pieces of answers, but it's still a huge point of exploration to me. I think that for the science illustration part, I love the dissemination of information. I really love what historically scientific illustration was used for, which, you know, in the height of exploration, you know, in the 1800s, that we didn't have the same use as cameras that we have today. We didn't have the ability to record what we observed today. So that was the only way that we were able to share information. For example, the Cook explorations of the Antarctic and the very first illustrations of penguins, you know, and being that artist at that time must have been so thrilling. And so to be able to share exciting things about the natural world is something that I feel very passionate about. While at the same time, you know, I think that there's more to say beyond just the straightforward, this is what this specimen looks like, this is what this species looks like, but to connect it, you know, anchor it in its relevance to us socially, culturally, how it shapes and defines humanity. And so kind of looking at those things and those allegories and I guess comparison points to me feels like that exploration in art, you know, which is what art has historically been needed for. So it's both of those things.
Sure. Yeah. So what kind of impact, I guess, do you hope that your work has? And do you feel that your art in particular should have or needs to have a purpose?
I do. To answer your the latter question, I think that was one of the things that I struggled with in that 6 years most, was feeling like I didn't know how to make my art have a purpose. And you know, it wasn't enough for me to tie my work to something emotionally or personally of myself. And I think that, you know, with what I'm doing now, what I really want people to take away with is not only information. And I think that when someone looks at my work, there's always something to take away informatively. But beyond that is to ask themselves some questions and to think about, well, just think about that. Think about how maybe what I am painting at the moment pertains to the overall picture of humanity and how we got here and why, and all those questions that I don't hope to answer, because those aren't necessarily mine to answer.
So it's more to get people to think about, you know, their relationship to the things that you're painting, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And the world's relationship to it. But at the end of the day, there is always something to take away more definitively too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. So 2 years after completing your studies at Cal State Monterey Bay, and, you know, sort of discovering your purpose and mission as an artist with scientific illustration, you ended up founding your own studio, Inkwell, you know, to sort of put that mission into motion. So tell me about that. Where did the idea, I guess, to create a studio come from, and how did that ultimately come together?
It's a funny story. When I was in the science illustration program, I actually started a blog, the blogspot.com, and I chose Inkwell as the name of my blogspot. And it was a play on words. It was work that was inked well, in about places in which I like to dwell. So that's really how the name Inkwell came to be. And then in 2012, when I decided to formally make it a studio, I think I did that really because I wanted the work to come outside of an individual artist. And so the name, I think I chose to not use my own name, because I felt like maybe that could almost keep it more objective or something, that it was, the work represented something that wasn't just about me. Again, like I think I really like to try to take myself out of it as much as I can. I don't know. Maybe that's also just me, being really introverted and shy, which is definitely, how I would define myself.
I thought it was interesting, just that decision to sort of brand yourself under Inkwell rather than establishing and promoting the Jane Kim brand, so to speak.
Yeah. That would make me feel really uncomfortable. I don't know. And I don't know how to quite describe that, but I feel safer, when I get to talk about Inkwell, I get to talk about it outside of me. And I often use we because there's a lot of people who now work with me at Inkwell, just not just there, but I have a team and that team fluctuates, but there's a definite we component about it. And somehow that feels safer and I don't feel as weird talking about the work. And, it's just a lot. I don't know. It feels more right than saying I don't know, that I is really uncomfortable.
No, I totally relate to that. That totally makes sense. And so you in the studio are most well known for the large scale works that you've done over the years. But are there other types of projects that Inkwell takes on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are a really diverse multimedia studio. We do straightforward scientific illustrations. I still love to do artist residencies, which I don't do a ton, but the ones that I have done are very meaningful. I do private commissions and fine art paintings and art shows. And, I think that it doesn't necessarily matter what the platform is, as long as the work stays true to the goal of connecting people to nature.
And as far as those large scale public works go, I guess what was it about that type of art that you were drawn to so much, as an outlet for your scientific art rather than the more traditional studio work? Why has that become such a big focus for you?
That's a great question. And again, it does go back to my time at the Science Illustration program at CSUMB. I didn't wake up one day or even grow up being like, I want to be a muralist. Although, maybe taking it back to our prior conversation of my experiences and connections to Chicago as a kid. I do remember when we would drive to the city, there was this one mural that actually I think it no longer exists, but there was this really, how would I describe it? Complex mural of important figures. And Martin Luther King was pretty front and central to this mural. And I remember seeing that every single drive and definitely being drawn to that. And so the power of a public mural and its ability to become a part of your daily vernacular without it meaning to, or without the impression that it has is lasting, whether you're specifically aware of it or not. And the democratic nature of murals has always been really appealing to me. There was a short stint of time in that 6 years before applying to the program where I was also working as a decorative painter for a decorative finishing company in San Francisco. And of course, we were focused on private murals at that point, and wall coverings and floor murals and faux finishing. So it was really different. But I did remember really liking the scale. So when I was enrolled in the program, it's 2 hours south of San Francisco. So I would sometimes drive home on the weekends. And as I was driving, there are a lot of billboards on Highway 101 heading south. And I thought, man, it would be so cool if instead of all these advertisements, there was information about what you might actually be able to observe immediately here in this environment as you're driving. It's so beautiful. So that kind of triggered the idea to do something called the Migrating Mural. And I started, really thinking about that at the tail end of the program. And when I moved out of the program into a 10-week internship period. So after you graduate, there is a 10-week period of internships that you have to fulfill in order to get your certificate. And you have to place yourself in these different opportunities. And so my very first internship was it was called a Science Visualization Fellowship at Yosemite National Park. So I got to live in the park for 3 months. And that's when I first learned about the Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep. And I thought, wow, this is a perfect subject. I myself had no idea about the bighorn sheep. And I didn't even know that there were 3 subspecies of bighorn, and that we had one very special one called the Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep. And in the 90s, their population dropped to just around 100 sheep because of a domestic sheep disease. So they had this elaborate story, and I was like, oh my gosh, this needs to be the first subject. And that's really how that project grew. And I was hoping that in making public art murals that I could teach passerbys about an animal that was really hard to see, really elusive, and for the most part unknown, to the larger population of California and beyond. And I think it's doing that. And when I started the project, I also thought, this isn't going to be just limited to one animal. I can see this being an ongoing mural project for a variety of different migrating species. So I wanted to do land, sky, and sea. So land being the bighorn sheep, sky, I struggled with who I was going to highlight, because there's so many different animals that you could choose. It could be a bird, it could be a bat, but ultimately I landed on the monarch butterfly for a number of reasons. One, because it's the geographic spans, it covers pretty much all the lower 48 into Canada and into Mexico. So the range was much larger, but the conservation story was really interesting, because I think conservation today can feel very daunting, like there's nothing the average person can do. But with the monarch butterfly and with pollinators in general, there's so much that you and I can do immediately that's actually going to benefit this amazing insect. So for that reason, I really wanted to tell that story and try to create the love around monarchs to then move it into action by planting native species.
Yeah, it's funny. After reading up on you, I've actually been looking at how to plant milkweed in my yard. So.
Oh, see, there you go. That's awesome. That is the best part about it. And and the biggest compliment that I can get from anybody who has seen my work or my murals is to say, wow, I'm seeing monarch butterflies everywhere now. And it's not that necessarily there are more monarchs. It's actually that now they're paying attention and the blinders have been partially lifted, and we're all, I think we all suffer a little bit from nature blindness, because it's really easy to overlook. And when, we're asked not to, that all of a sudden, like, the world becomes much more exciting and bigger, and there's creatures everywhere.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so that first round of the Migrating Mural spanned from 2012 to 2014 and consisted of 6 murals altogether. How did you go about choosing the locations and like getting permission to paint?
So one of my favorite things about being a scientific illustrator is obviously collaborating with scientists. And so with each one of my mural projects, I do try to seek a conservation partner that will guide me into helping me tell an accurate and an interesting story, factual story. So while working at Yosemite, I was told by a number of people that I needed to reach out to Dr. John Wayhausen. He was the guru of bighorn sheep, and specifically of the Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep. And he has a foundation called the Sierra Nevada Bighorn Sheep Foundation. It's a mouthful. And then, in meeting him, he took me out on a 2-day hike, and we collected bighorn sheep poop together. It was awesome. But through him, I met a number of other people in the Eastern Sierra, including the director of the Fish and Wildlife Bighorn Sheep Recovery Program. So that was, through the information there, I was able to understand that the recovery program had very specific, what's called herd units, established in the Eastern Sierra. And each of those herd units represented, a certain population. And the recovery program was basically defined by trying to restore historic areas of where sheep would have been and growing the population large enough and then translocating those sheep to these historic population sites. And so the Bighorn Sheep mural series is, highlighting specific herd units across the 125-mile stretch. So starting in Lee Vining, the Mount Gibbs and Mount Warren herd unit, represent a certain historic area of sheep. And then we move down to Bishop, and that particular herd unit is relevant. So they're divided by the herd units described by this recovery program.
Very cool. So as far as getting permission to paint on the specific sites themselves, was that something that you had to kind of coordinate all up front, or is that something you kind of did along the way, or what?
Up front and along the way, that proved to be the biggest challenge, was actually finding sites and private building owners to give me permission to paint on their walls. Most of the land in the Eastern Sierra is public, and that meant going through agencies that would have so many challenges that it really wouldn't have worked out. So, when I finally landed on, the Mount Williamson Motel as my first site, that was a privately owned, set of buildings, and, Mount Williamson herd unit actually was one of the original herd units, and, one that survived, the near extinction of the animal. So it ended up being a perfect place to start the story. Once I got the yes from her, Henrietta is her name. She no longer owns the motel, but, I felt like I had enough pieces in place to create a Kickstarter around it. So the first mural was funded through Kickstarter. And then after that, there was another fundraiser in Bishop to, raise money for the next murals, and then the next mural. So it was a little bit of a domino effect of prepping, but I think it took about 2 years to establish everything before I was able to begin.
Oh, wow. So even before starting.
Yeah. 2010 was my time in Yosemite, and 2012 was the date of the first mural.
Nice. Did you have people along the way that were helping you, or was it all you for all 6 of these?
So for the first mural, I had one friend who came down there with me to help me. And it was always kind of like one person, but largely it was me. And of course, developing the whole project was a bit of a solo act as well. But I think in my experience working as a decorative painter, I always knew that, many hands make lighter work. And so, I've always thought of these murals as a group effort, and not just, me painting solo. It just doesn't make sense to do it in a time frame that, is doable without others.
When you have people that are helping you with these, are these people that you recruit locally, or are they people that travel with you, or how does that work usually?
Sometimes it's locally. A lot of the murals, in the Eastern Sierra, I had the help of local artists. Well, actually, she's a very gifted artist, but I don't think she would necessarily have described herself that way. She was just a bighorn sheep enthusiast who also was an art enthusiast and had a lot of natural talent. And so I did invite her on a number of murals. Her name is, Julie Rolfe. Anyway, so, it just varies, but as the projects have, grown and they've become more complex and complicated, I try to, use the same people over and over again, just because it's easier, and, the familiarity with everybody, and, their knowledge of my process and the way that I work is there already. And it's a lot of work to train a new team. So I often bring them with me.
Whenever you're working on one of these large pieces, how much, I guess, what type of upfront design goes into it? Like, what's your process for the upfront design before you even start painting?
Well, definitely establishing the site first. I can't, create a design without knowing where it's going to be. So having a in-person site visit is usually pretty important. And even when I travel afar, so going, to Arkansas, to Florida, I should first mention that it usually takes about a year, of planning before I get to actually paint the mural, because there are so many steps involved. So a site visit for sure. A lot of different conversations with, the building owner, the parties involved, whether it's the Nature Conservancy or Xerxes Society or whoever's involved, understanding the story that needs to be told in that specific location. So if you look through all the different migrating murals, you can see that each one is really very unique. I don't have this is what I do, this is the style of mural that you're going to get. It's very responsive to the location, and the, narrative that I want to tell with that location. So after I figure out what that storyline is, then it's really just, I think a similar process to anyone even making a standalone painting. I sketch out, different ideas and then superimpose them on the building and work with different palettes. And, by the time the client gets, sort of the finished mock-up, that's pretty, one for one. There aren't very many changes after that, because I don't want the town or the community or the building owner to feel surprised.
Sure. And after the design settled on, I guess what's your next step as far as getting it onto the wall? Do you use some kind of a grid system, or what's your approach? Yeah,
and there's actually a lot of variation in that too, depending on the building. I often print out the drawing to scale. So I have a large format printer, 44-inch printer, and like wallpaper, I print out the pieces and usually tape that up if it's a very flat surface without very many windows or architectural features. And then I cut out the shape and trace it. And then in other instances, I will use a grid system and print out, the mock-up at a small scale, and then just freehand draw it with the team at the large scale. So it sometimes I project if it's indoors, because then it just depends on the amount of control I have at the site.
What kind of paints do you use? Are they special types of paints?
No, they're just exterior house paints. And acrylics. And, of course, when I'm using, the acrylics, I do pay attention to the light fastness. So I try to use, the most permanent colors, to mix with.
Does that differ if it's indoor versus outdoors? Do you use different materials, or are they the same?
I end up using the same materials. I just definitely don't use spray paint. I mean, being environmental murals, I just can't justify, using spray paint, which is still really, really, really bad for the environment. So, it kind of heartbreaking because, sometimes I wish I could use spray paints because they're so much faster and, you can blend with them in a way that you takes a lot more time when you're using like house paints and stuff.
I was going to ask you what the reason was behind not using spray paints, but that makes a lot of sense. Like it's an environmental, question.
Yeah, it is. And that is definitely on the forefront of everything that I'm doing.
So you mentioned the second round was monarchs, and you've done 9 of those so far, I believe.
Yes.
Do you have any more planned?
We had one planned in Boston, and it was supposed to go up in August. But as you know, the world is a very different place now, and we unfortunately had that one cancel. So we are still hoping that we can find a place for it in the Boston area, or at least in the East Coast in New England. It's a really important location for the story. We have one upcoming in Santa Monica, California, in 2021. I don't know the specific dates of that yet. But
how many will there be total? Have you already decided on that?
no, I didn't want to put a cap on this because, the range is really big. I do feel like there are some holes. I'd love to see one up the central corridor. We do have one in Arkansas, but, especially in, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma,
Austin,
Minnesota. Yeah. I mean, totally. It would be, so fabulous to, have some representation there, even if it's just one or two. So until then, I mean, all of these murals are ongoing. They don't necessarily end. If there was another opportunity to do another Sierra Bighorn mural, of course, I'd absolutely be up for that. In fact, it would be very cool to revisit an old series.
Nice. So you've done land and air. So sea, what's Act 3 look like?
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to disclose this yet. But we do have one in mind, and we are putting those plans into motion.
Nice.
But I think if I give enough clues, I'm sure people can figure out. It is going to be a fish, and it is a fish that also migrates pretty far inland.
Okay.
So I think that makes it pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think we can have some people figure that out.
Yeah.
So, timeline-wise, it seems like between the two series of Migrating Murals, you worked on this fairly epic project called The Wall of Birds at Cornell's Ornithology Lab. That was 2,500 square feet indoor mural that was meant to celebrate their centennial. So how did that project come together? I guess, how did that get kicked off? And I think you've even been referred to as like the Michelangelo of the Sistine Chapel of Birds.
That is quite a designation. Yeah. Thanks for that. Again, I don't know. I'm constantly a self-doubting, artist who's always striving to get better. And, I don't know if that title is deserved, but, anyhow, yes, that also can be tied back directly to the Science Illustration program in that, one of my other internships was at, Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I applied to their Bartel Science Illustration program and got to spend, 5 months there. And when I was there, it's all kind of funny. It all sort of comes full circle because the Migrating Mural project was also a big factor in, how Fitz, the director of the lab, even knew that I did, murals. And when I was there, I was, again, it took me 2 years to really develop the Migrating Mural before I could paint it. And it hadn't been anything yet. It was still just an idea, but National Geographic had a ocean conservation, a reader's choice competition. And so, you could submit your idea, and there were 15 different ocean conservation projects. And so I submitted the Migrating Mural, blue whale as a concept along, California's coastline. And it ended up winning, and, they did a small interview, and, it was circulated around the lab. And so Fitz read the interview and was like, "Oh, you do murals?" And, he sent me an email and he said, "I didn't know you did murals. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you." And, we met, and he walked me out to the second floor landing that overlooks that wall. And he sort of presented it and was like, "I have always envisioned a mural here in the visitor center. Would you be interested in doing it?" And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I think that I don't even think enthusiastic yes kind of covers the amount of effusiveness I think I shared with him. He wrote a really beautiful foreword for the Wall of Birds book that Thayer and I published, and he really mentions that moment, and that enthusiastic yes was really what he says, made him feel like, okay, great, I have the right person. Because nice. Apparently he had asked 3 or 4 other artists before me, and they all said, "Oh, nice idea, but no way, that sounds like way too big of a project to take on." So that's really how that came about. It was, timing, and I think that I really believe in that, and the world just in general, it's a lot of it has to do with timing and putting yourself in a position to that opens doors, and that's what that was. And from that, even that was like a 2-year process between the time he asked me to do the mural to when I actually got the green light to even begin the preliminary drawing. So these are all very long.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding out. And then that project itself took like more than
2.5 years.
2.5 years to complete. So did you move out there for that 2.5 year period?
I moved out there. So 2.5 years includes all the preliminary sketch work. I did that here in California, but then 17 months was how long it took for me to paint the whole mural on site. So I did move to Ithaca for that 17-month period.
Oh, wow. That's commitment.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is my life. I genuinely do not have a life outside of art making.
What all for the Wall of Birds? What all went into the selection of the species? Because I know that it covers like all 243 families of birds. You had 270 species total. Like what went into that selection process?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that number. That number is actually now bigger. Even
is it really?
In the 5 years that the mural was completed, there have been new families added to that list. So it's a little dated now. But yeah, and even from the moment I got the yes to when I began painting, 12 additional families were added to that list. So yeah, that number is constantly changing. But I am very fortunate not to have had to make the selection of which bird was included. That was the difficult job of the lab. So I did get a species list from the lab.
Okay. And then as far as like, I guess, was there a committee that you had to go through as far as, because this is a very scientific community and I'm sure accuracy is a big aspect to them. So what did that, I guess, approval process look like? Did you sketch all of these out, draw all of these out at small scale, get approval, and then start working on the bigger piece? Or how did it go?
Yes, that's exactly how it worked. Okay. I did a sketch. I worked with the scientific advisor. Her name is Jessie Berry, as well as, showing the director, my sketches as well. And they each probably went through about 3 to 4 revisions. She helped me scale all the birds to size. And so I would print them out at scale, like at, what I thought would be 100% and then a 90%, 80%, 120%. And we kind of hold them up and compare and decide collectively which size felt the most true. And, it was a very lengthy process.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it, for sure. And then, a couple years ago, you mentioned before you guys came out with a book. So I guess where did the idea come from to put a book together?
Thayer being the journalist that he is, as soon as I began painting the mural, I think he had it in his mind that, okay, we're gonna make a book about this one day. And sure enough, I guess I finished in 2015 in December. I was home, San Francisco in 2016. In that year, we put together, sort of a pitch, found a literary agent, and she helped us sell the book. And a year after that, the book was, published. So I think in 2018 was when, the Wall of Birds book was published.
How involved were you with the production of the book as far as like layout and the book design itself?
Very involved. Very, very involved. Obviously the design, Harper Design did an incredible job with, the fonts and the layouts and everything. But I think the way that it was organized by the different continents, Thayer and I very much, had say in how we wanted to present the stories and the birds and the book to the world, which we were very, very lucky and grateful for.
Nice. I mean, that project as a whole seems like it was a very, rewarding experience, even though there was a lot of work, obviously.
Of course, I think forever it will be one of, if not the most important project in my career. There was just so much that came together, that really defined what is important to me as an artist. So not only, is it in a public setting, it's in, you can visit the visitor center for free. And there's also an interactive around the mural that you can explore. So the access to it is global. But it, I think, really marries science and art together in a way that is timeless.
Very cool. So let's talk about what you have coming up. I saw in a recent post that you were working on something for Palette Gallery in San Francisco. So I guess what can you tell me about that series?
Yes, I am very excited about this. I don't do a lot of shows, as I think you have probably discovered in looking into the work. So whenever I am able to do it, it is quite meaningful to me. And as I've mentioned before, my goal as an artist is to try to find connection points between humanity and nature in as many different ways and new ways as possible. And this series, given that, well, not only because it's at a restaurant, but it ended up being a perfect venue because it is restaurant/gallery. This series is called Poached, Pruned, and Peeled, and it's all around our connection to nature through food and how we lost that connection along the way. And I think that there are a lot of different moments in our modern day civilization that contribute to our lost connection to nature in food. So that's what in a nutshell, this series will cover.
Very cool. So I guess, is that going to be a show that's going to have an exhibition at some point? Like, when is that planned for?
Yeah, there will have an opening. Hopefully, fingers crossed that we can have openings, but it will be for the first Friday of February.
Okay.
I think that's February 5th is when it opens.
Very cool. How many pieces do you think you'll have?
Let's see, 1, 7, 8, 9. Maybe about 10 or so pieces. But again, because I'm able to sort of curate the whole experience, each painting will also have kind of a sculptural component that is not necessarily for sale or part of the painting itself, but to contribute to the overall narrative of the whole exhibit.
Very cool. And so I guess anything else coming up that you want to put on people's radar?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm really looking forward to a public art piece in Houston. It's not part of the Migrating Mural, but it is a celebration of something called the Bayou Greenways. And so all the bayous in Houston have been converted to bike and walking paths. And so we're painting a retaining wall to highlight the epic bird migration that actually happens, through Houston. And so that will be about birds.
Awesome. And what is that for? My sister and her family actually live in the Houston area.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, it's for the Bayou Greenway, facility, the park facility. So, it's a celebration of, its creation and its opening, which again was supposed to happen this fall, but, it got pushed back to next year.
Awesome. Very cool. I'll have to tell her all about that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, please do. So I'm really excited about that project.
Awesome. So, where can people find you online?
At inktwell.com. You can also, find me through Instagram at Inktwell. I do have a Twitter account, which I'm not very active on, but that's also at Inktwell, and on Facebook as well.
Awesome. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh boy. Have you had, George Baruchi on your show yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, that would be somebody I'd love to see you have on. Let's see, I'm trying to think of anybody else. I'm sure you've been recommended Tiffany Bozick and Isabella Kirkland. And I'll tell you why, especially with Isabella Kirkland, because I feel like she has been doing what is really become more popular now for decades. Her work has been a serious inspiration to me, not only in technical ability, but in content. Really admire her. But that's a cool question that you ask everybody.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate it. And thank you so much, Jane, for coming on and chatting with me today. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jane. I really liked what Jane had to say about wanting to make art with a purpose. And her purpose is never about banging someone over the head with a specific message, but rather trying to help open your eyes to the natural world around you and help you to think about those things some more and think about your own relationship to them. The hope being that if people do start thinking more about how their own decisions and actions affect the natural world, perhaps that will naturally foster a greater appreciation for them and a desire to take better care. And I'm excited to see what Jane ends up putting together for her upcoming show at Palette Gallery in San Francisco. The show, Poached, Pruned, and Peeled, opens in February and focuses on our connection to nature through food. It's a really great idea. With how industrialized the food industry has become, it's very easy to form a disconnect between the processed food that we eat and their natural origins. So again, that's at Palette Gallery in San Francisco, and it opens Friday, February 5th. There's a lot of alliteration here. Poached, Pruned, Peeled, Friday, February 5th. Sorry. Check in with the galleries and Jane's Instagram to find out more as it gets closer. So thanks again to Jane for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. One big way you could help out if you're enjoying the show would be to review it on Apple Podcasts, and of course just sharing the show with your friends. As always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairespodcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairespodcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.